All right, and welcome back to Photo Tips. I'm here with Nala, as always, that I think was licking her butt, but now she's licking something else. But today I want to talk about old photos, specifically how to make your photos look old. Now, why would you want to do that? Well, just take a look at Instagram, for example. A lot of pictures that are uploaded there have these special effects filters that make them super high contrasty or desaturated or kind of weird looking. And basically what that's doing is emulating the imperfections of old cameras and lenses. So it is something that's actually kind of cool, desirable, because so many cameras today are so sophisticated, the pictures are so sharp, a lot of people are just tired of it. So I'm going to show you kind of how to make some of your pictures look a little bit older without using a quick filter, maybe some more complicated, a little bit more advanced ways of doing it. So let me show you a picture up on the screen. This was actually taken with an iPhone, which actually is pretty sophisticated. I will zoom in to 100% here. Here's an iPhone, and you can see the corners are pretty bright there. It's fairly sharp. I mean, it's a pretty decent photograph. This was taken in winter because we're filming this. We are in winter right now, so it is a little bit less desaturated. So one thing I want to do probably is I want to make it black and white, and then we're going to add some features that kind of make it look old. So let's go ahead and look at the picture here again. This is Adobe Camera Raw. Will be in Adobe Photoshop later on. And the first thing I'm going to do is, let me note first off, this did expose for the sky, so it was actually a little bit darker down here, so I've already adjusted a little bit, but let's just assume this is where the camera started. So I'm going to go ahead and go from color to black and white to make it really easy, and I'll go just like that. And let's go ahead and do a couple little things here. First off, before we get to making it all old, I do want to go ahead and darken that sky just a little bit here because it is a little bit blown out, and this is something you would probably be doing in the darkroom back in the day, but we can very easily do it here in the computer just like we would have done then. All right, so let's go ahead and leave it about right there. So I decreased my exposure about 3/4 of a stop, and I'm going to bring down the highlights because some of those clouds are starting to blow out a little bit white. So I think I like what we've done there. And then I'm going to go into what are in color mode anyway, HSL adjustments, but in black and white, it's your black and white mixture. And what I can do is I can basically manipulate what would be the colors in this image as if I had a black and white filter. Now I know that's a lot of information, so let me just kind of show you here so you can get the better idea. One thing is I want to make this sky a little bit darker. So what I'm going to go ahead and do here, I'm going to go down to blue because I already know that sky is blue. And we can, slide it down. We can do very dramatic and make it look not completely very realistic. Or, we can do something subtle, like something about right there or so. And that's probably what you want to do. And we could have done this back in the old days with a red filter on the camera. It would have darkened the sky. Then a couple other things I want to do. I want to make this a little bit brighter, a little bit kind of glowy, because back in the day in old film, it's not as contrasty as cameras are today. So we want to make it softer. So let's go ahead and do that. I know there's a lot of yellow, orange, a little bit of green here in the plant. So I'm going to go ahead and bring up my yellow like so, maybe a little bit of orange. And I don't know if I'm going to do too much in the green department. Let's see. Yeah. So you can see, basically we're making this image a lot flatter. Now we don't want to do overboard here, but it does make it a little bit more old-fashioned looking. So let's go ahead. I was trying to fool around with my clarity. Now, more modern sensors would have higher contrast, more depth to the image there. So they would probably, look something like that. But again, we want to make it old-fashioned, so I don't want to do too much of that. I think I might leave it about right there, maybe increase my contrast ever so slightly. Okay, so let's do some other things. So one thing characteristic of old lenses is that in the corners of the image, it's darker because lenses, it was very difficult back then, still difficult today, although they do a very good job. It's very difficult to get a consistent brightness across an entire lens. So there are some features in here we could do. We've done it in past videos called a post-crop vignette. And there's just a slider here under this effects. And we can adjust that like so. And that's a decent filter. I use that a lot. But today, I'm going to have a little bit more control. So what I'm going to do is use a gradient filter. And let me show you what that is. I'm just going to clear out my settings here, and I click gradient up here. What I'm going to do, I'll just do the sky here right now. This is 3/4 of a stop, brightness reduction that we're doing. And basically what it does, I've drawn one out here. The strongest part of the filter will be at the top here where this green circle is, and it will start to fizzle out by the time it gets to the red. So that's how that works. It's a gradual filter, not quite as precise as an adjustment brush, but in this case it works quite well. So I'm going to go to all four sides of the image and just do a gradient filter, pretty much, consistent, one filter to another. And let's see. So about right there or so. So you're talking about old-fashioned. You can see what I mean. We really darkened up those corners and made it, something a little bit different. I want to accentuate this even a little bit more now by making the center of the image brighter. So what I'm going to do is talking about adjustment brushes, and we use one here to darken the sky. But I want to go ahead and let's say, I might go a little bit, a little bit extreme. Let's take one full stop of brightness increasing, and it's going to be a pretty big, I just want basically a big dollop of brightness in the image right about here. So I'm going to tap, and let's see what we can do. That is actually quite effective. Let's see, maybe not quite that much. You know what I might do? I'm going to cheat a little bit, maybe increase that clarity just slightly. I guess that's not old-fashioned, but I like the way it looks. And one thing I'm thinking as well, I'm starting to think that the filter down here might be a little bit too much. So the advantage of digital is we can kind of alter this here. I don't think I want it to be quite as strong, and I'm going to increase that clarity just a little bit so this doesn't fade out so completely down here at the bottom. Okay, so as you can see, we're really starting to get that old-fashioned look. It's bright in the center, dark in the corners, something that camera manufacturers have been trying to eliminate for years, but we're bringing it back. So that's something that I like quite much. Let's go ahead and zoom into 100%. And as you can see here, this is still a very, relatively speaking, sharp image. Apple, in this case, that made this iPhone, did a good job with this lens, even though it's super tiny. So what I want to do is let's go back under Effects, and we're going to add grain. Now, basically, grain is from film. So those little speckles, as you glow up an image, they get bigger and bigger. A lot of people say, well, I don't like that. But, again, we're trying to make this image old-fashioned, and actually is starting to come back in style. So we got a grain slider here, and I'm just going to start adjusting it. And we'll start playing around with it. And let's go ahead and notice specifically in these darker areas down here, you can see as I bring this slider up, that it does start to increase quite a bit here. And I can increase the size of the grain, which kind of makes it pretty fuzzy, or I can decrease it to make it a little bit more finer image there. And then roughness, just kind of adjust the look of it a little bit there. In fact, I may add a little bit more. And to me, you see, let's look up here in the trees. That really, adds that kind of old-fashioned look to it. You can see we've got some grain here up in the clouds. It's almost kind of, I don't know. It's grainy. I don't know the other word to say it. So I kind of like the way that looks in this case. Okay, so I think I'm going to say I'm done right now with Adobe Camera Raw. There's one other thing I want to do, and I got to go into Photoshop to do that. So let's go ahead and hit Open Image. All right, and we will do that, and I actually want to add some color back into this. I've done this before in some other videos, but I'll do it here as well. So I have to go up to my mode and change it to RGB color so I can actually add a color filter. And the way I've got Photoshop set up, I have these adjustment layers here, which actually, we don't do too much Photoshop here, but right now we're just loaded in this image as a background image, and we can put other images or effects on top of it. And one of those is a adjustment layer. In this case, we're going to do a photo filter here. So let's go ahead and do that. And it automatically selected a warming filter, which is probably what I'm going to want to do. And I'll just kind of sort through these here. That's an 85, which is a kind of a stronger one. LBA is somewhere in the middle. And then 81 is kind of a weaker one. So I'm just trying to play back and forth between an 81 and an 85. And of course, we can also edit the color and do any color cast we'd like. But I think a slight 81 is probably what we're going to want to use here. So let's see here. I'm actually pretty happy with that. So let's go ahead. I just want to add a quick border to the image, and then we can say we're done. It didn't take much to add some old-fashioned looks to this image here. Okay, so there we are. So imagine if that's on your wall, we've framed it, we've matted it, and this is what we've come up with. Again, we've darkened those corners, we've made the center of the image brighter, and we've also darkened that sky, just like we might have done with a black and white filter. So that I'm pretty pleased with. Let me go ahead and I'm just going to zoom in. Let me get rid of the border here for a second. And I just want to zoom in. We'll show you again the grain that we added. So it definitely is a cool kind of old-fashioned look, and I like it quite much. So I'm going to go ahead and save this out. And as normal, we'll go ahead and compare the old and the new. So this is the new version. There we go. Let's go back to Adobe Bridge. And whoops, I'm in the wrong place. Let's go back to where we need to be. So this is the before image, okay? And again, a basic, it was an okay image, and this is the reason I actually picked this image to make it look old, is because it was pretty dull, kind of a winter image, but I did like the composition when I took it, the way this little stream is going in here with all the bushes. I liked the way that looked. And then we have the after image right there. So again, going over what we did last time, we won't rehash everything, but we made it darker, added that color cast, we made it old-fashioned. So I think that was a lot of fun. So I hope you enjoyed learning how to make your pictures look old. So I encourage you to try and do that in your Adobe Camera, your Photoshop, your Lightroom, or maybe even just throw up an Instagram filter, or if you're on your phone app, your Photos app, a lot of times there's some quick adjustments you can make in there. So have fun with it. Not everything looks good necessarily in super bright colors and super sharp and all modern. So give some of those old-fashioned looks a try. So on behalf of Nala and I, who has now moved over to that square, do appreciate you watching Photo Tips, and you have a good one. Bye-bye.